Amy Morgan, the feature writer for the San Antonio Marriage Initiative. And I am so happy today to welcome Paul Allerton here. He is a scoutmaster and a relationship coach. His book, The Essential Guide for the Married Man, is highly rated on Amazon. In it, Paul applies the principles he's used to lead more than 100 young men to attain the rank of Eagle Scout to create a guidebook to help men be successful in their marriages. Paul, thank you so much for being here.
Amy, it's great to be here with you today, and I really appreciate what you and the initiative is doing, as well as the article that you just wrote. I actually just got a nice note from a father who ordered 3 copies for his son for Christmas presents, and that's really inspiring and encouraging that this is getting into the hands of the young men who really could use it.
Oh, well, that's exactly what your intent was when you wrote it. And you've got your nice backdrop that shows I've got my copy here with some, I always like to show what I do with it with my sticky notes. But let's talk about that. What inspired you to write this book?
A couple things. One is I realized, the best way that I could help preserve, marriages and strengthen families is to equip the husbands with the skills and understanding, right? That's where it begins. The fathers, the leads, and young men are not being taught these lessons and these principles for success. And I want to, sort of step back and just think about it. Imagine for a minute a world where all men were disciplined, committed, generous husbands and fathers who cared for their wives, children, and community. Everything would change. Everything. And that's what I'm striving for. And this is entirely possible if we can provide guidance and counsel to the men and give them those skills and give them that hope and encouragement.
Well, I know I have a wonderful husband, but I know I snuck it in his work backpack and keep sending it with him on his trips. But even as I was leafing through it, I have 2 young adult boys,
Hmm.
and it just has such good. It's very practical. It's very easy to read. It's well laid out and organized. It really makes a lot of sense. What was your model for this?
Well, when I got married very young, the thing that I knew is I didn't know what I was doing. And so I went on this quest to figure it out. I came from a home that was not ideal. So I listened to lots of the masters, a lot of focus on the family, during my commuting back and forth. And those principles and lessons are timeless. I, scoured, some of the key principles of that are taught in the Bible, and there are whole books, on some of these topics, but there isn't this aggregated guide, and that's what I wanted to provide is this path so that men, could have a direction forward.
Well, I know that's one thing we talked about, as you said, it provides a path and a plan similar to your Boy Scout handbook days, right?
Hmm.
It's just very
Yep.
clear. You follow it through, and it's clear and leads you to a place.
And there are two big pillars. One is being prepared. And what does a man need to be prepared even before he embarks on being in a relationship with a woman or contemplates marriage? Who am I? Where am I going? What do I value? What is my purpose? And then the second, path is making good choices and living up to those choices. And it's funny, my wife says the girls do the choosing and the boys do the losing. Which is I've witnessed that a lot in their relationships. And just because a woman chooses a man doesn't mean the man should choose the woman, right? But if a man is serving his purpose, he'll attract a woman who believes in him, right? He'll attract the right woman and then form a relationship based upon shared values and beliefs and faith. And that's the foundation for, a healthy marriage is being clear in your identity and aligning yourself with someone who shares in that journey.
I know we talked about one of your analogies was the train, being on the train
Mm,
station, and you got to know where you're going, which train you're going on, so you know who's going to get on the train with you.
right.
You probably can say it better than I
Well,
just did.
just it's a John Gray analogy from I forget which book it was from, but he talks about a man needs to be going someplace, and the woman will get on, and first of all, if you don't know where you're going, no woman's going to get on. But also, you have to be going where you say you're going. If you say you're going to Chicago, you can't decide halfway through, okay, now I want to go, to Florida, right? Because right, you because then that creates, conflict and strife. And it's really about being prepared, serving your purpose, knowing where you're going, and then building a family that reflects those values and beliefs.
Well, and talking about that, some of these things the young man needs to know when you've coached many young men and many, through scouting, and then many, including your three own sons, right, who did the
Hmm.
Eagle with you, and then many other men. Let's go through some of those things that a man needs to know. I know there was uh, you had an assessment too, where you kind of had a chart, a
Hmm.
visual chart.
Yeah. So the attitude assessment tool is one of the key um, things in the book on page 31, and it gives me great hope because it always works. Right. It measures a man's attitude on two dimensions, right? And so on the horizontal dimension, you have initiative and resignation. I'm a man who takes initiative, or I'm just resigned. On the vertical, you have blame and resignation, and that creates a simple 4x4, grid where you have the quitter down the bottom. It's not I'm not responsible for it, and I can't do anything about it, so I'm resigned and quit. If you take initiative but you take no responsibility, you become the disruptor, right? There's the person who says, "Well, this is never going to work," right? And drawing attention to himself, but not serving a purpose. Likewise, if a man starts to take some responsibility but no initiative, mostly because they're paralyzed by doubt, they just become the procrastinator. They feel the tug of that responsibility, but they never have the confidence and courage to embark on that. And obviously, the ideal is the servant leader. And what's fascinating with young men and old men alike is when someone actually uses it, men are so competitive that they will change their behavior to manipulate the score. No one, right? It's fascinating. And no one says, "Hey, I was 30% the procrastinator yesterday. Let me drive that to 40." Right? There's this natural, I believe, God-given tug inside men because we care deeply to be that man. And the problem is, absent a guide, doubt and resignation, set in.
Well, and it's easy too, like procrastination. There's so many other things that can just, it's easy to sit in a chair and play video games. You don't
Right.
have to, you don't have to connect. You don't have to commit. You're entertained. I mean,
Hmm.
it's easy to let that just go away instead of being inspired to something better.
Called. Right. And one of the things that men need to know, and I write this in the book, is becoming, and becoming a father are two of the most important rites of passage in a man's life, right? Because they expect something from us, right? A marriage is not about what you intend to get, nor life for that matter. Life is not about what you're going to get from the world; it's about what you're going to give. And the same model obviously applies to your marriage, and it's that it's the obligations and responsibilities that a man accepts, and marriage is certainly one of those good ones that pulls us past where we quit on our own. It's the thing that develops our character, and that's the key. Is like a man who avoids responsibility will never become the man that he's called to be.
Well, and
Because
that even goes into, I know one of the parts there in the getting ready section is that obligation, but it's more than an obligation. It's like you said, it's a calling, but to have a job and to be
Mhm.
support the family and to shoulder that responsibility for the long haul.
Right, and to be the provider, and that's one of the challenges is as the societal roles change. A career is not something that women were somehow cheated from. It was always a man's way to provide and protect for his family. And now that absent that tug, right, then there's room for less than that, right? If a man knows that, his kid is going to eat or not based upon what he does, he's going to go out and do that extra work, right? But absent that tug, we need very little, and you wind up with less than you are, right? There's lots of men who have avoided marriage because they're afraid to fail, and then they're in their mid 40s, and quite honestly, they're a fraction of the men that they could have become because they've lived their life focused on what they want for themselves as opposed to what they had to give.
Yeah. You talk about that, about those two really sad kind of categories of men. One, the ones that never committed and never grew into being the person that God really wanted them to be.
Right.
And then you also talk about the ones that maybe had a break, they had a failure, and then they're looking back
and
later
and they're and they're bitter and resentful.
and they kind of
And
are past the way of being able to reconcile that.
right. And so the be prepared part is, let's not do that. Let's let's give, and you don't have to agree with everything in the book, but you need to decide what you believe, right? So it's, you know, um, you know, it is one way. I think it is a good way. It's proven to be very effective. Um, but you need to know, each man needs to know, what he stands for.
Well, and you start with that too, with saying, "Hey, let's have a foundation." Like
Hmm.
the Boy Scouts have their mantra, but you say, "Hey, pick a prayer and
Hmm.
let's start with that." Let's talk about that. How you ground, because again, sometimes it's easy to say in generalities to do something, but let's get down to some nitty gritty details.
Well, let's go back to the attitude assessment, right? Our attitude is not reality; it's just our perception of reality.
Yeah.
And I think we all have our natural negative attitude, which leads us to be, the quitter and doing what we want. But how do you have to do something physically to hold a positive attitude, right? Because life will wear you down. So with the scouts, just the simple act of saying the scout oath every day will cause them to do and be better. And I know that because those that do that, that's what they say to me. And for a man, it could be something else. It could be a promise, an oath, a prayer, something as simple as saying the Lord's Prayer every day. Something that pulls us forward and calls us to be the man that God calls us to be. And if we can do that in the morning, because discipline, another lesson, discipline is a muscle.
Yeah.
Just like, right, everybody knows if I go to the gym, I'm going to get strong. Well, the way to strengthen my self-discipline is to engage in a daily discipline. And those that do that, and again, someone wrote, a whole book on just make your bed, right? The discipline that the military teaches, right? You don't have to be in these organizations to benefit from these lessons.
Yeah. I've heard
But the
that word.
lessons, right? But the lessons are enormously valuable.
Yeah. And you talk about too the dearth of opportunities for the older men to be sharing these rites of passage and sharing these things, which they could do by reading your book and doing
Yep,
the book with as a small group, because we're talking to a lot of
absolutely.
marriage champions. This is something men could really lean into, take, internalizing it themselves, but also then sharing it as a mentor, right?
Right, and then having conversations, right? And sometimes it's, hey, I wish I had this when I was your age, and here's what I did that didn't turn out so well, and my desire, right? Because there's this natural desire to take what trauma in our life, what could have paralyzed us, and allow it to become a source of our power. Let it to be the thing that motivates us to help others. And so, yeah, I may have made a mistake, but if I can, help someone avoid that pain of and the consequence and costs of doing that, then that brings meaning to my mishaps, and I think that's important for older men. One of the things I say is we have to be invested in and have a vested interest in the men in our care, and historically that was true because the young men used to take care of the old men, and the old men provided counsel and wisdom. But when that's broken down, we lose the benefit of that, of really understanding that, hey, you know what, I need to be invested in it. I need to take that risk. I need to, not just try to be friends, but be a man of value, right? We men need other men for companionship, for counsel, encouragement, and really challenge, right? We need to have the ability to allow other men to push us past where we quit on our own, because we all have a line, right? And the last is a call to action, right? A well placed, can I count on you for this? Will pull a man forward. You know, Now, I love the clip from, called the Death Crawl, where, um, the it's from the movie Facing the Giants, classic, good high school movie. It's really, it's a great movie. But
Yeah,
in that 6 minute clip, it embodies those five principles.
lovely.
And the young man who was being coached, Brock, could have said at any time, "Hey, I'm out of here. I quit." Right? But with the right encouragement, with the right challenge, with the right counsel and companionship, he goes way past where he would have done. And then at the end, where the coach says, "Can I count on you?" Right? God has gifted you with leadership. Don't waste it. That call to action is enormously powerful and only can be given from one man to another like that.
Well, I love we talked about that too, when we were working on the article about that, just the challenge to a younger man that
Hmm.
you have something that the world needs. We're counting on you,
Right.
and then helping them forward to bring it out of themselves. And that just really doesn't happen very many places, other
Well,
than maybe on the sports field or
yeah, and again, it goes back to scouting under morally straight. In the book that I use from the '60s, it says your conscience speaks to you about yourself, about your moral obligation to make your life count. Everyone's telling the girls to make their life count,
yeah,
but no one's telling the young men. And again, I have have daughters and sons, and it's not we don't have to take away from the men for the girls to excel,
that's true.
right? But if the men fail, and the if you look around the college statistics and the high school statistics, girls are outperforming boys 2 to 1 in every category. It is toxic to be a young man, right? So if you're a mother or father of young boys, if you're not equipping them with the spirit of making their life count, that we're counting on you to do that, that's just another you know stone in on their back that's going to hold them back. And then the girls start to look around and say, well, there aren't any good men
Yeah.
because they're all playing video games. It becomes this, right? So if we don't fix this problem, it's only going to get worse.
I had a friend at one point, like I said, my boys are 22 and 24, but I had a friend at one point, she was so frustrated with those video games that she threw the console out of the window onto and let it crash on the ground. And I threatened that a couple of times. Of course, they've grown past that now, but still, I was
Yep.
that was there's that lure of the I don't know if it's the procrastinator or it's the other one down on that bottom corner there, but there's that lure of passivity that is just so prevalent that really needs to be overcome.
Yeah, but yeah, I would say it's the other way. It's the symptom, not the problem.
Hmm.
Right? The problem is the absence of that call. The problem is the absence of that guidance. The problem is the absence of somebody counting on them for something,
Yeah.
right? It's it's and again, that's what I hope to address with the guide. If I entrust in you an expectation of responsibility, that will pull you forward. And again, we're experience-based learners.
Yeah.
And our confidence comes from our skills, and our skills come from our experience. And we have at least half the boys growing up in this country without a father in the house. So where are they going to get the guide, right? The mom's job is to protect it. We don't want you to get hurt. The father's job is to make sure you don't get hurt too much,
I love it.
right? So we have to let them take risks. We have to give them challenges, right? I love the line from Batman. Why do we fall down, Master Bruce? So we learn to get up.
Yeah.
Men need to learn, young men need to learn how to get up and not have their mother, protect them and try to do it for them.
Yeah,
And
that's
again, I understand it's natural, but at some point that's got to stop. And at that point is really when they're 12 years old and they're in this period of preparation we call adolescence. And our young man's job, and that's why I think scouting is so valuable, because it addresses that age range
yeah.
and it prepares young men. Everyone wants the benefit of being in the program, but the work of the program is developing these skills, gaining confidence, figuring out who you are and where you're going, and understanding what your purpose is, and having the experience of leading others. And once there's such a void of masculine leadership, when one shows up, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And while the kids in ninth grade say, well, it's not cool, those same kids are, respect the same young men 4 years later, when they're the leaders in all of the activities and they're getting into good schools and have a clear sense of where they're going in their life. But
Well,
it comes with a little bit of friction, a little bit of failure, and a lot of lessons.
not being over mommied,
Right.
which is
And it's a trap for single moms and moms with husbands who aren't that strong. And so we gotta that's where the other men come into play. That's where scouting comes into play, good youth groups and other organizations.
well, and going back to then the application for the book, even for a married couple,
Hmm.
and that man and maybe his group, maybe not so much with the younger man mentoring, but even with himself, you have a whole section at the end of how to for a man to be really to take on that mantle as a
Hmm.
leader in his home and his family. And I loved, my favorite thing is your request translator, because that spoke to me. I'm like, oh, that's, can you unpack what that is from?
Oh, sure. That and that just asked me to talk about the game too. But the request translators is I think as you said, the most valuable thing in the book. Men and women communicate differently, and most men don't understand that, and we listen from a man's perspective. And the request translator is really the key to eliminating really 90%, maybe 95% of the conflict that exists, because you know anytime, and what the rule is, anytime you hear a complaint about you coming from your wife, you're not allowed to respond until you can translate that complaint into a request. Because if a man is insecure, um, if he hears a complaint, his natural tendency is going to defend, is to defend himself. And the way we defend themselves, is we either escalate, or we withdraw, or we right. There are four natural responses to conflict: escalate, withdraw, that everyone's aware of, and then you have read negative intentions in what the other person says or does, which where I start to ascribe to you, well, you said this because you have a negative intention.
Yeah.
And the last, which is really dangerous in a marriage, is you invalidate who your wife is, right? That is destructive and hurtful, and we have to. But those are the responses of conflict. And so when a man hears a complaint and he's insecure, he's going to defend. He's going to use one of those weapons of defense, and then create this conflict that most often didn't exist until he opened his mouth. And I don't expect men to be weak and timid. It's not yes dear, yes dear. It's like, I hear you, and let me think about what you're asking for, and let me understand that you are also insecure, so you're not always going to ask for what you want. So
Mm,
you might say, well, very, very common, right? A wife will say, you're never home. Now, meanwhile, the man is working two jobs, trying to and so he says, "Hey, I'm working two jobs, trying to put a roof over your head, put food on the table, pay for school, and pay for all these kids' activities and all these things you're doing,
grateful.
right?" um, when So that's the defense side. right? The ego gets engaged in on the negative side, and then man should have an ego, but we have to keep it under control. If you turn that over, and if a man can hear a request, goes back to the obligation thing, particularly if he's the only one who can or should be responding to that request, there's this natural tug. So the same message with different listening, instead of creating fueling conflict, which then just turns into resentment, actually draws the man closer to the wife. So even if he says, "Well, I I can't be with you now, but Tuesday night we're going to go out for dinner," right? It pulls things again. That one lesson, if men only learn one thing from the book, I pray that that's what they learn. And I've heard lots of stories from men who were married for years and had conflict for years, and the conflict starts to go away
Because
because
you
the
said
man
that,
starts to listen differently.
because you said that just like that simple thing with her saying, you're never home. And it can
Hmm.
sound very critical, like you said.
Critical, negative,
I
right?
think I've had those words come out of my mouth too, especially when my husband was traveling quite a bit and I had little guys at home.
Hmm.
But what I'm saying is, I
I want to.
miss you. I love you. I wish you were here because I miss you.
I want to be with you.
Yeah. And if he can hear that instead of you are doing something wrong,
Hmm.
then he can respond, like you said, with by moving toward instead
Right.
of the attack.
The conflict goes away
Mhm.
completely and is replaced by attraction and bonding. Because there's nothing a man doesn't want to hear more that from his wife than "I want to be with you."
Yeah.
But you don't say that. You say you're never home,
Never home.
right? That one, and the game. The other thing that I have in the book is the game, particularly for fathers with young children. That you want to create an attitude and a context where the mom is celebrated. So the game is anything that goes well in the house, mom gets credit for.
Hmm.
Right? We stop for ice cream, thank you, mom. We have a good dinner and whatnot. And we've been playing this game in our house for 20 years. Right? I have grown adult children, and my middle son will come home, make French toast for his mother, which is her favorite meal that he makes, serve it to her, and then say thank you, mom. Right? He's 25 years old. We're still playing it.
I love it.
Right? And it creates a context. I want men to build homes where people come to, not run from.
I loved when you said that because so many people have come from brokenness and they remember wanting to run as fast and as far
Right.
away as they possibly could. And they're standing maybe on the edge of a relationship or on the edge of a marriage or in a marriage and they want to do something differently, but they
Hmm.
don't know what that something is. But your guide could help them make that difference.
Right.
Like, this is how you do it differently because you want something different. You want your home to be the one where people want to run to, not from.
Right. And that's my desire, and I will, do what I can to motivate, cajole, inspire, and exhort men to step up to that responsibility. And at the end, deep down, that's their desire. Men care deeply, but too many are lost. Too many um, don't know a way forward, and even the ones that do, there's good reminders in here as well.
Another one of your reminders that I really liked as well, and I like highlighted it and kind of showed it to my husband, was I'd rather be wrong and do the right thing than be right and do the
And do
wrong
the
thing. And
wrong
that can
thing.
go both ways. It really is.
Hmm.
To give
Well,
up your right to be right.
yeah, and to give your spouse the benefit of the doubt, right? It goes back to that response to conflict. I'm ascribing you to negative motivation,
Yeah.
and then I'm responding as if that is true.
Yeah.
It might be true, but it is at best an assumption and probably not true at all.
Having that kindness and that presence of mind to just stop for just a second,
Hmm.
put it through the translator, and said, "What is she saying? You know what? Even if I'm wrong, but I do the right thing, that's what's
Hmm.
more important."
Right. And yeah, even if let's pretend, right, that she's just having a bad day and she's being alright. She's taking, right. Human nature says we take things out on the people that are closest to us. So even in that moment where she's having a problem and being, weak and insecure, you just step back and say, listen, I'm not going to use her behavior as an excuse for mine. I'm going to be responsible for my behavior no matter what. And I'll tell you, these lessons, how a man behaves in his marriage is the most accurate reflection of his character. Now that is a painful message for men who are divorced, because we like to blame the other person, but we have to take responsibility. And it's true because the benefits of doing this work, the benefits of being, a good husband and father are a decade away. There's no immediate payback, but the payback is in our character and the character that we instill in our children and the quality of the home that we create and being an example, uh, and a place for others who don't have that to come to.
And leaving that legacy and being that place where people want to come to instead of run from. Well, I think that totally it just really encapsulates it with a wonderful statement. But Paul, it has been so great talking to you. We could have just keep on forever, but our time has ended, unfortunately. But Marriage Champions, if you want to find out more about Paul and his book, you can always find us at samarriage.org. Thank you so
Amy,
much, Paul, for being
Amy, thank you so much. And remember, together we will change the world for good.